Hello, everybody. I'm gonna talk about circular economy as a tool because my point being that there is so much great progress we just saw in the field of how do we create the product, but we need to be mindful of not just the product, but also the structures from within we create the product. So essentially, we had the slides with the renewables. There is so much to learn from the renewable energy sector. One of the things we should also learn is to not just focus on product, but focus on structures. In Denmark, where I'm from, we're now seeing that the first mills have been up for about 25 years. They're going down, and they're going to go into incineration because no one knows how to reuse them because they were designed to essentially just become waste material. So instead, finding ways in which we consider our sourcing, our production, our use, and our end of life much better. Why is that? We'll see. There are three global trends, essentially. One being we're going to be 9 billion people in 2050. The IPCC is very clear. We're going to have to reduce our CO2 emissions by at least 70%. And we have a completely enormous, endless amount of waste right now. You could almost say that waste for the next couple of 20, 30, 40 years will be an abundant resource until we probably, hopefully, found different ways to reduce or leave out waste. So my question, and the reason for being focused on structures, is this a mega problem or is it a mega opportunity? Could we find ways of doing things differently in which we can actually utilize the fact that we will be more people on this planet, we will be more people entering the middle class, while at the same time working with our waste and actually creating a new kind of world, a prosperous world, where we can all thrive without compromising on climate. And the reason why I believe that it will be doable is if you see in history, we've built this modern world of great prosperity, and a lot of wealth has been created, a lot of well-being has been created through the modern city. And we build it on great innovation, so we have a huge track record of creating these amazing, amazing things, and we want to build upon that. Those innovations has created consumption that has given us the opportunity to do new things, to try new food, to buy things that we like. Consumption that has led to growth that enabled new innovation, that enabled new things to happen, that empowered us to do new things. So as you can hear, none of those things to me are bad. Those are things that we need in order to actually transform our current systems towards a regenerative system. That's our fuel, one might say. What is the problem, however, is that right now we're doing it in a linear system where you have production, consumption, and growth equaling waste. So how do we avoid that? How do we change those structures so that when we do produce new things, we are mindful as to how do we circulate them? How do we make sure that business are incentivized to actually create products that last the longest possible, that isn't discarded as waste at the end, but actually is designed to be reused again and again and again? My point of view is that circular economy will be the tool for that. So finding ways in which you're designing for circularity from the get-go, meaning you innovate your resources, you start finding smarter ways of using your resources, and then from there, disrupting things in a new way. I'll show you at the end how in the food sector, you can see some of the supplying industries taking complete new roles, and you'll really find that being very common in the circular economy space, that all of a sudden you realize that what you're currently considering as a waste resource, something that you're not even thinking has value, it actually only has cost, because you have to discard it, can actually be something that you can produce, something that you can do differently. There's a great example with if you look to the renewable sector, there's sun power in the States. So they went and actually took the challenge of finding ways in which they could work not only with the product but with the structure. So essentially in their factories, enabling all of their factory chiefs to be entrepreneurs in the sense that they asked them to go out, find their waste streams, and turn them into new products and new revenue streams within their business. So leading to a new type of consumption, a consumption that leads to growth and prosperity, but in the sense that we've decoupled that growth, we decoupled that value from the use of materials and the use of emissions. From there, creating the growth and then creating new jobs, creating a different type of job, bringing value back into this sort of craftsmanship of reusability and really working with things. I'll just leave this here for a second, but this is essentially what I was going at in terms of saying this is about decoupling growth from materialization. So how do we design from the start towards a regenerative system? So in essence, my point is being that we need to care not just about products, but about structures, about how we design our ways of being, how our mindset is set to look at things. You can sort of, Bill Gates describes circular economy as this opening both your eyes. So you have like a traditional setting of energy and efficiency and all of these things, and they're sort of like opening one eye to the world of sustainability and this sort of doing less bad. When you start opening both your eyes, is really seeing how can we turn these things around and start valuing our resources for what they really are. So instead, what if we started reaching for the stars? So circular economy in that sense is really about seeing creative, positive constraints in using the resources that we have as best as possible, setting the ambition high. You can say a lot of things about Apple and their sustainability, but one thing they're really great at is communicating about it. And they do a lot in circular economy now, and they framed it in the sense that to ask less of the environment, we ask more of ourselves. And I think for circular economy and changing things around, that is very much true. You need to be extremely thoughtful and talented as a designer, as an engineer, to have that and see that having those material constraints is actually positive. It creates new innovation. It creates new choices. That waste is more. If we are to succeed in this, we need to be mindful of doing it in a mainstreaming, enabling way. It's the same with the clean meat slide, that you need to lower costs. Really seeing that this is a way to drive sustainability without compromising on price, quality, or aesthetics, but instead increasing it. And then the fact that local is global. We need to be much more mindful of what is available in our local resources, utilize that and make the most of it as opposed to transporting from afar. Because what is so beautiful about all of this is that what we transport is instead our ways of thinking, our ways of designing, our ways of designing the future, not actually the products in themselves, because there's no need for it, because we have more than plenty resources available wherever we are, if only we tap into it. So a few examples as to how that actually happens in daily life, and this goes back to the disruption, and you change your sort of way of being. This is a supermarket in Hørup in Denmark. So they do cooling, because you have to cool your vegetables. But what they tapped into is that whenever you do cooling, you create heating. So right now, that heating just goes up to the air. But instead, tapping that heating into the local district energy system, so that all of a sudden, a supermarket is not just a supermarket is actually a heating provider for the local community. This is IKEA's new gas station in Finland, where they will provide fuel for cars, basically based on all of the food waste that is currently, unfortunately, still happening within IKEA's massive food production. One way of saying, okay, we can actually, while working to reduce food waste in general, but this stuff that's being wasted right now could actually be used as a fuel for our cars as opposed to regular fuel. IKEA then all of a sudden take a completely different role than what they're used to. This is a restaurant in Denmark. It's called Amas, by a brilliant chef named Matt Orlando. He is there becoming this catalyst for change, in the sense that he is changing regulation, because he usually, as a restaurateur, normally you have supply, you buy something, but he actually gives something back to his suppliers. He gives back his waste, and then they reuse it again and again and again. So taking a completely new role to your waste management as a restaurant. Unfortunately, one of the things you need to work on there is legislation, and legislation in the sense that how do you enable change? So being a change agent, not just being a restaurateur, but actually trying to create positive change. And that's a new role for him, but it's a role that means that he has a much greater marketing tool in that sense. So really like looking at what is the role that you want of the future? Do you want to be just a restaurateur, or do you want to take that creative constraint, make sure that you create fantastically tasteful food, but at the same time also become a supplier to your suppliers in the end? And what does it all look like? So McKinsey looked a bit into the opportunities within the food sector in Denmark alone, but in terms of circular economy and food. And as you can see, one thing to just get started on is just reducing our amounts of waste. There's a 150 to 250 million euro advantage very easily to be gained there. And then not least, biorefineries having 300 to 500 million potential there. And those are just the starting points. Both of those are essentially circular economy 0.10, reducing waste. They have nothing to do with this sort of how do we essentially enable different structures in which we create food, where we share resources, where we go back to being local, where we work together to design our things differently. How can we work with not just creating a different product, but creating a product where the packaging is done in a way where you don't have to discard it at end of use, where you don't have food waste because you share your resources in a completely different way, where you don't have negative externalities in your production, where you consider how do we actually transport food and how far should we allow our foods to be transported if we could actually just do it locally instead. So being mindful of all these things and being ambitious in terms of our own solutions, really setting the bar high as to what are the creative constraints that we will put on ourselves in order to make that happen, and then make the solutions work from within there. So I am Ditte, and if you want to hear more about the circular economy and how I think it's a great tool to create a regenerative system and a way for business and planet to thrive together as opposed to apart and really enable that growth, please seek me out. I'm happy to have that conversation. It's one of my favorites. So thank you so much.